Welcome to episode 298 of the Grid Talk podcast. And today we are here to review qualifying for the 2023 Austrian Grand Prix. My name is Louis Edwards, and joining me today is a solo guest, and it is Phil Mathew from the Grid Strip podcast.
Hello, hello.
But as always, before we get into this episode, we must thank our sponsor, Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, line, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use our mobile device or your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. And after the paid promotions out the way, a little bit of personal promotion for us on the Grid Talk podcast. We have changed our socials and we are starting a new social campaign. So you can now find us at Grid Talk UK on all social media platforms. That is Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and even our YouTube handle is at Grid Talk UK. And also, of course, our big live event is happening on Sunday. Join, Tom Downey, Owain, George, Sophia, all in Manchester. All the details for that are on our socials. Make sure to check it out. It's sure to be a great day. Watch the race live with our hosts, and then also stay around and be a part of our first ever live audience for a podcast. Right. So now we've gone through all of that, Phil. Let's get on with qualifying. Qualifying on Friday, of course, because of the new sprint format. This is not for the sprint tomorrow. This is for the actual race on Sunday. But Sunday's going to be a day to dread for someone like Nick de Vries, because a lot of pressure at the moment on Nick, whether justly or unjustly that some people feel. He's in his first proper season of Formula One, but we know what Helmut Marko's like, and then sticking it P20 at effectively Red Bull's home race is not a great way to go about things.
Yeah, for Nick de Vries, even with one of his close friends trying to speak up for him and give him words of advice, it's not looking good for AlphaTauri. They're trying to make changes there. And, Yuki Tsunoda missed out on advancing to Q2 as well. So a very bad day for the junior outfit. Whatever they're trying to do, they can change a name, they can change people, they can make it the clone of the Red Bull, but they're not Red Bull, and they never have been. They've been more of a kind of like a disaster area where everyone gets left, and then they end up getting fired, and they end up doing well once they leave Red Bull, the vast majority of them. So, unfortunately for Yuki Tsunoda, today, I think he could have gone into Q2, and considering all the stuff that happened later in Q2, might have had a chance later on. But for Nick de Vries, it's not been pretty for him this year, and disappointing, honestly. But I also take it with a grain of salt in that Pierre Gasly last year was in this team, and he's a Formula One Grand Prix winner. He's been with that team for many years, and he looked ordinary in that team. So, we have to look at it with that sense, but nobody really has given Marco or Toast or whoever runs that team now and all them other geniuses credit for actually having patience or logic in regards to driver choices and development.
Yeah, we've heard some pretty strong stuff from Helmut Marko this week in general, which has surely not helped the situation. But in terms of Yuki, we've actually become fairly accustomed to him putting in some good performances of late. It feels like a bit more of a blip, I would say, than what we kind of come to expect from Nick de Vries this season.
Yeah, I would say that Yuki also feels the pressure. He knows Iwasa has been running really well in F2. They have a lot of potential talent that's out there, Liam Lawson being another one. And And if you're going to go and make a move and decide to start over again, they have options. And it's not like, I mean, I don't feel great for some of those options, but they have options. So Yuki is trying to prove that he deserves to be around still. If he's going to be or not, we're going to determine here over the next 2/3 of the season, because he's had a few years in Grand Prix racing. So, I mean, Honda wants a Japanese driver, so he has that in his favor. But we will see what happens. There's a lot going on with that team behind the scenes, and it's not going to help when you got a lot of stuff going on overall. You can't compete on a week-to-week basis in this sport from top to bottom.
Yeah. And another team that's kind of sort of getting used to seeing down there is Haas. But, you know, we see a lot of huge gaps between teammates in this sort of qualifying. Maybe you could put it down to track limits. We'll touch on that later. But Kevin Magnussen, P19, Nico Hulkenberg, P8, 11 places different. And this isn't really a first time we've seen this. We've seen it quite a lot where Hulkenberg has managed to get something out of this Haas that Kevin Magnussen just hasn't been able to do so. Like, why do you potentially think that is, given that this is Hulkenberg's first season back in Formula One?
I think it's a mirror, Louis, of what happened last year. I think Kevin Magnussen came back from running Indy cars and IMSA, fresh, feeling good about things, came back into the team. They're like, we're so glad to have you back. We needed to get rid of who. So now we have you. We know you're steady. And it was fresh and new. And it's Haas, so they don't make the greatest of upgrades. They're not putting in as much into it. It's across the board. Anything that Gene Haas owns in terms of motorsports is not exactly doing great these days. Kevin Magnussen this year, I don't know what happened. Last year, he qualified on pole at Brazil. He had great moments last year. And his teammate spent a lot of time in the wall. And they're like, well, you can't do that. And that's not good for our team. And that's fine and well. But when you have a guy who's a capable hand, somebody who has been a okay point scorer and is steady, and he's in one time zone and you have the other guy in the other, granted, Nico's race pace and craft has not been great this year, granted, probably because of the car. But I don't know what you think about that, Louis, but I think that Nico's great on one lap. I think he's always been that way over his entire career. Magnussen has never been known as a great qualifier, and he's more of a race driver. So the car is not the greatest car. They're in that bottom 4 teams for a reason. So you just have to go and beat within that group. And they've all scored points at this point. So it's really trying to stay ahead for Magnussen, make the most out of the situation, work on hard tires on Sunday, and try to go long, see if safety car something comes out, and then try to get close to the points, because we're going to be talking about at least one team here that is starting to move up the ladder here very quickly. Then it's a nice thing to see, I would say, for people who have been fans for a long time.
Yeah, we'll get straight onto them because Williams, Alex Albon is showing really what we all saw at, when he was at Toro Rosso before he got the Red Bull seat, why he was chosen for that. And I think it is really clear to see now in hindsight just how early in his career he was promoted to the Red Bull. You can see very clearly now that he was not ready for it. And now he's taken a sabbatical. He's come back into F1, wiped the floor with Latifi last year, who was already in that team. Of course, it's probably a little unfair to compare teammates this season because Sargent is in his first season, but Albon, P10, could have been higher. Unfortunately, he had his lap time deleted, but we're seeing this Williams and Alex Albon is just clicking and it's working and it's just amazing to see.
Yeah, James Val's going in that higher was a great job by Doralton to get him in there. They've been behind. He said that a lot of their technology and a lot of things they got going on are going back 2 decades, which is back in the BMW days when Juan Pablo Montoya was there with Ralph Schumacher. I mean, and I'm a JPM fan, but the fact is they were good in 2003 and they are where they are now. Um, yeah, it's typical. We were talking about that a few minutes ago about AlphaTauri, right? About how they judge their situation. Well, here's Exhibit A of what shows how great of judgment and they have in terms of their drivers. And we're going to talk about another one here too. Those are two guys that they basically chewed up, spit out, said they can't drive, they're terrible, they don't belong here, none of that. The guy's driving theoretically the worst car on the grid, theoretically. And he's getting Q3 appearances, just like his bestie George Russell was doing a couple 2 years ago or whatever. He's getting stuff out of the car that he shouldn't be getting out of it. And it speaks to his talent, his ability, and his personality. The team, he fits the team, and that it all kind of is a good balance. He's going to be there for a while. I think they're going to build around him, and it's a great thing. For Thailand, if they want to go to Thailand, I think now they have a great opportunity because now he's starting to really show himself, and he's a very outgoing guy. Logan is struggling on qualifying pace. The lack of practice today didn't help. I know that qualifying has never exactly been great for him either. He showed at times in F2 and F3 that he could, but he's more of a racer as well. He does better in the race. If he can fit, he just trying to switch those tires on, get it right, has been tough for him. And I feel bad because, obviously the American guy, I want him to succeed. Seeing how this car is now, he has the upgrades. I feel like by the second later in the season, we'll finally start to see that progress. It's slow. People will be like, well, they got rid of Latifi. I mean, Latifi was in that team for 3-4 years. I don't know how many years the guy was around. I mean, he was just like Stroll. And so it's like, how many years do you need? The guy's a raw rookie, has been in F2 2 years. One of those years was one of the worst teams, and 1 year of F2. F3 2 years, F2 1 year. I mean, the guy's raw, and there's a lot of potential there. And Val's believes in him, and I think the team believes in him as well. So Alex Albon's carrying the torch for Williams, and it's a great thing for that organization. They have a lot of good things working. I think they kind of want to steady how many points they score so they don't lose as much development time so that they can build even further into 2024 and see what happens with that.
It like I try not to judge drivers too much on their first season, even, back when we had the absolute misery of having to watch Nikita Mazepin hurtling around in his heart, so I don't want to judge him too much for his first season. But, Logan, there is clearly potential there. We've seen it. He was looking good in practice earlier today. There's clearly he is starting to meld with that Williams car a bit better. And, you're talking about Albon doing a similar thing to Russell. Well, he out-qualified Russell today. So, yeah, it's an absolute amazing job. Now on to Alfa Romeo, and unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot you can say about Alfa Romeo. They're kind of sat in the middle of that 0 point sort of backfield.
Yeah,
they don't look particularly quick. They're not really in the hunt for points tomorrow, with Bottas in P14 and Zhou in P17. They get another crack at it tomorrow for the sprint qualifying and the sprint race, but on Sunday you're not really going to be holding up much hope for them.
Yeah, this track doesn't fit or suit their car, and when you have a guy who is basically an expert, a master at Austria, spinning off of turn 1 and causing a red flag early in Q1, not sure how far it compromised Bottas's qualifying. He was able to advance to Q2, but the guy has done some of his best work in his career at this racetrack, and he's only 14th. The car doesn't fit this track by any means. You'll say, well, it's for fat. They are great on long straightaways, but there are tight corners in between all those long straightaways. And if you have no grip and you can't accelerate off of those corners, you're going to have an issue. So, it's a race by race basis, especially. I mean, I think we could say that for a lot of the teams, even getting further towards the front. But for Alfa Romeo, this year has not been as good by compared to last year. I think Zhou has made progress, but of course today didn't have the greatest qualifying. Yeah, I mean, when Bottas spun out in Q1, I think that was basically a microcosm of what their whole entire day was going to be. We'll see what they can do in the sprint if they qualify a little further up front, but they're not really competing for points this weekend. They're waiting for Silverstone or France or wherever or Spa even to compete in that sense.
Yeah, it's just not great, and I think they're probably even holding out a bit longer. That just waiting for a lot of Audi money to come their way. They just got to steady the ship until then.
Yeah.
I'll be honest. I'll skip Red Bull for now. I'll talk about them later because Perez did have an absolute shocker, but I don't think we need to be talking about them just yet. So we'll move on to McLaren. Oscar Piastri, P13, Lando Norris, P4. And I've seen a lot, a lot of criticism of Lando Norris over the course of the season. I'm not sure where it's come from, but a lot of people are like, see, he's not as good as we think it is. See, he's not doing it. But he's P4. In a McLaren that has just got some new upgrades, but it's still nowhere near as competitive as it should be. And he's right there, only a couple of tenths behind Max Verstappen around one of the fastest tracks that we see on the F1 calendar. You got to give him props because he's doing a tremendous job wringing every single tenth out of that McLaren.
I know that amongst our crew, there's plenty of people who root for McLaren and root for Lando Norris, and this is one of his best tracks. He did get his maiden podium finish there. He's qualified really well there. He had the upgrade package, of course, and that's made a big difference, especially on this circuit. He has a teammate that is very hungry and is the real deal as well. I think that, as much as anything, has kind of changed the game a little bit for Lando. No offense to Carlos, no offense to some of his other teammates he's had over the years, Daniel Ricciardo. I mean, but I think Oscar Piastri is somebody who can hold him equal and accountable. And today, this is one of his best racetracks, and he had new upgrades, and he went out there and showed what he can do. And that's good for McLaren. They need that in their battle. I mean, they're probably not going to, they're definitely not catching Aston Martin, but they need it in their battle with Alpine, right there in that middle of the road, the second tier. I mean, Ferrari's kind of in that realm too with Aston, but Piastri, track limits, whatever. Unfortunate. I think he'll be able to move up though in the race, and if they call good strategy, he can get a point. Lando, it's just kind of maintain and try to be around those Alpines. That's his race really, because we know what's going to happen in the race, especially at the front.
Yeah, we certainly do. It's kind of written in the stone of the F1 season, well, the 2023 season, that there's just not. There's usually only one way that races go these days. But as you said, the Alpines, Gasly is down in P9. Ocon even further down in P12, didn't quite make it. It's I'm not sure how you'd feel if you were Alpine, because if you look at the drivers that are in front of you, only really Norris, Hulkenberg, you're probably a little further away from the Aston Martins that you've really would have wanted to be. And so you can't be too disappointed because they are still very much in play for, decent points. And that's all that they really need to be getting at this point in the season.
Yeah, I think for Ocon, it just never seemed like he was able to put it together today in the one lap pace. Gasly had pace, and he's had a hit or miss career there. Of course, being a Red Bull driver, this is yet another example of a guy they dumped out. He finally bailed because he was sick of it after years of being basically used, and he's figuring it out with this team. And Ocon's been there for many years. They're and now they have a huge investment. This is for the week, a few days after that big announcement. Kind of a disappointing qualifying, I would say, but I would also say that they can make moves in the race to get both those cars in the points. They are ahead of one of the McLarens. They're in the mix with one of the Mercedes. I mean, there's opportunity there. I didn't think Ocon really put together the best qualifying he could have. Gasly, it could have been better. Stroll pulled one out of the hat late. A couple other people did too. So, I mean, I think that qualifying run of not P9, if it's P6 or 7, I think we can be a little happier with that. But I think they can work with that and go on into the sprint qualifying with at least a baseline to maybe move both those cars up into the top 10 for the sprint.
Yeah, I think that's where they'll certainly be looking. It's kind of like one of these rare sort of instances in Formula One where you actually do get another chance at it. You made a bit of a mess of it today. You're going to have another go at it tomorrow. And of course, you do have the tyre rules, but we'll see how that plays out for all the teams. But Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton has stated on numerous occasions, and you can't fault him for saying it, that this car does not suit this car does not suit this track. And I think it's been the case with a lot of their cars have not ever particularly suited this track. So while he is probably quite happy with P5, P11 is not a great result for George Russell. It wasn't even like track limits. He just didn't seem to have the pace. It was very strange. We see him going on his final qualifying lap in Q2, and he's 3/10, 4/10 down. He's just not where he really needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, if we were going to go and compare it just based on his teammate, which is what you always do, Lewis had great first sectors, and George was losing out to him in the first sector. Then the second sector is where they had the biggest problems, and George was losing way more time in sector 2 than Lewis. This third sector is basically those last 3 turns, and you have to get off of the last turn really well to make that sector work. He just looked slower, and that was the whole entire session. He just looked like he was 2-3 tenths off Lewis the whole entire session. And I mean, neither car looked great. Lewis was able to wring as much out of it as he could. He knows this is a consolidation race this weekend. I don't know if he really thinks that they're going to be in the mix with the Astons. The Ferraris look really good for now. So this could be this is a consolidation race. Get George into the points, get a few more points, try to keep themselves ahead of Aston Martin, moving on to further races where they'll probably be a little better. I mean, it's whatever. When it comes to Mercedes, they're better off than where they were at the start of the season, but their car is very track specific. And this isn't one of the ones that's going to work. It's the same like Monaco. So I'm kind of concerned about Hungary in that sense, but we'll see about that here in a few weeks' time.
Yeah, it's always been an odd one, Austria, for Mercedes, and it's one where even when they've been in the hunt for the championship is one that often has slipped them by, either because Red Bull were very quick, or even Ferrari were very quick. It's always plagued them as a bit of a tricky track. And another team that has been a bit further away from where we've expected them to be is Aston Martin. You may think P6, P7 is not bad, but we're used to Alonso being there on the front row challenging. But no, this time he's actually behind Lance Stroll. Before this race, it was a 7-1 qualifying battle between Alonso and Stroll, and Stroll's managed to pick one back. It's I can't imagine you're having a happy Fernando in the Aston Martin garage today.
He can pick whatever Taylor Swift song he wants to pick that suits him for that qualifying performance. Fred getting out qualified by Lance there on that last lap, not the greatest thing. A rare off session for Fernando, but as I said with Mercedes, I think it's a little more of a consolidation deal for Aston Martin right now. Their battles with Mercedes for that second in constructors. So now they're trying to figure out, George is out in 11th. They're in 6th and 7th. If Stroll can actually get a decent start and not completely mess it up the whole entire race, they have a good chance at double points. And I'm sure Fernando's not happy, but for what they are, where they have been, I think thinking about even last year, getting both their cars in a Q3, that didn't seem like that was very likely. So now that they're both in Q3, you have to take it for what it is for year by year. And I think Fernando will be fine on Sunday. He always seems to be. So that won't last long, the Lance being ahead of Fernando.
Not to mention, as we've kind of already mentioned at times, it might gear up Fernando to be a little bit quicker and a little bit more on it tomorrow, so he can at least get another one up on Lance. Because even though we've seen Fernando be so nice and so kind to Lance, he's going to be seething at the fact that he lost out. He's not someone who, despite whatever facade he puts on, he's not one to ever take losing to his teammate lightly. Famously, of course.
Yeah.
Right. But a team that, came so close, and we're talking less than half a tenth off Max Verstappen, Charles Leclerc, P2, Carlos Sainz, P3. Ferrari fans are going to be incredibly relieved to finally start seeing some good, solid qualifying pace from that Ferrari.
Yeah, that's it's a positive sign in what has been quite a interesting and somewhat dark a year on the Formula One side for Ferrari. Their WEC team goes out, wins pole, and wins the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Been the bright spot of the whole entire year. And Leclerc did qualify on pole at Azerbaijan for the race, but promptly fell back. This race, we'll see. He is one of the guys, him and Carlos, when they're able to have the right car under them and strategy that isn't an absolute disaster, they can actually do something. Like if you give them the car, they can do it. They have this driver lineup is as solid as is really solid. Yes, Leclerc makes horrendous mistakes that for somebody of his level shouldn't. Carlos is way more steady. He's not known as a great qualifier. So for him to be in third, that's a pretty big deal. Leclerc's a qualifier, and I know he wanted that pole to get on the clean side of the track, but we'll see what happens in the race on Sunday. Of course, we're going to have a little preview of it tomorrow, depending on how the sprint qualifying goes. But for Ferrari, and what has been a brutal year for them, they have a positive to go into Saturday with, going into the sprint qualifying session or practice, and then the sprint qualifying.
Yeah, it's really a good foot to push on from. And as I said, I think Ferrari fans will be incredibly happy, just to not only just be up there, but to at least looking like they can compete. Whether or not, as you said, whether or not they're actually that close to max race pace, like Charles said, the Red Bull's a rocket in a race. It's going to be very difficult. But, he has one round here. He has done a good job. There's every possibility that something out of the blue may happen. But we do have to get onto our overlords in the Formula world, Red Bull. The biggest disparity between teammates in this qualifying was at Red Bull. 14 positions separate Max Verstappen, who took pole, as I said, by half a tenth, and Sergio Perez, who could not, for the life of him, keep that car on the grey bit. Like, we've heard a lot about track limits in today's qualifying, and no doubt we'll hear a lot about it in the sprint qualifying tomorrow. But 3 times, just surely lifting a little bit more, braking a tiny bit more. Yes, you're going to lose a couple of tenths, but at least you're going to get through.
Yeah. I mean, I figured I would let you go there and see if you're going to go in on Checo, but everybody else is doing it. I mean, that when you have that much pace in the car, at least give yourself a little bit of room. You don't have to. In Q3, okay, fine, I get it. Q1 and Q2, like, don't even bother to get anywhere near the exit curb off of 10 or whatever. I mean, it's just go and give. I mean, Russell was doing it, and the car was slow. I mean, the thing is, you can do it, and in that car, you were going to get in the top 5. That's the problem, like that's where, Marco and all these other people whining and moaning, and Horner. It's like, that's a car that is a top 5 car in their mind. I mean, it's a rocket ship for one guy, and it's a car that never is going to be good, proper for the other guy. And the irony in that is, like, they don't have to worry about the constructors. I get it. They don't have to worry, but it's like, don't you want them to finish second in the world championship? Like, wouldn't it make more sense to go and give Checo what he needs instead of downgrading him all the time? Like, granted, he made mistakes. Fine, I get it. He's not had a great last, month or so in qualifying, but we already know what's going to happen. We already know who's going to win the world championship. We already know who's going to win the constructors. All that. You want Checo, if you want to say that he's your driver and you gave him an extension and all, you want him functional, so that he can actually get you good points, so that he can actually finish and basically be a blocker, worst case, for him. So it's like, I don't get it. I get it, but I don't get it. I mean, but I also know it's just a pattern of what they've always done. And I don't think it would change no matter who they put in that car. It's a waste, honestly. They'll say, well, he made those mistakes. It's on him. And that's fine. I think he's going to be hungry tomorrow to get up front and do a good race. And I think that'll be the momentum. I think he'll reset tonight, go into tomorrow as a new day, knowing that there's pace in the car, give himself the security, and get in the top 10 and see what happens. And that's what he has to do. We already know what Verstappen's going to do. We already know what this is going to be on Sunday. But the fact is, this is more about, at this point, it's more about Checo and the whole dynamics with that, and how the history of Red Bull. That's what the real story is. Everyone was going to wax poetic and all the fireworks and all the crap in the stands, but that's the story. Because if they really want to have a team to compete, especially once these new regulations come along, you need to have a second driver. I mean, as much as they don't believe in that notion, the most successful teams generally do have a second driver that's functional. So I mean, Red Bull's never bought into that, but it's logical, and certain people have been able to manage it better than others.
Yeah, it has always been an odd thing at Red Bull. You know, even the years when Mercedes were dominating, at least they were want to. Pretty much every race. But we saw so much from Checo. Early in the season, 1-2 races, leading the world championship. People were thinking, is this going to be his year? Is this him going to finally? But it's hard to see a driver that was on so much momentum just drop, and that can't just be, it can't be confidence, because why would it be confidence? He was, doing so well, and now he's failed to make Q3 4 times. It's weird. Like the stat that was put on Twitter, Nico Hulkenberg has reached Q3 more times than Sergio Perez.
It's just insane.
Hulkenberg's in the Haas.
Yeah.
Like it's such an odd thing that's happened to Checo, and unfortunately now he is building that pressure. He's got so many extra eyes on him for tomorrow that he just didn't need, and unfortunately now his position is coming into question. And we've seen what even slight rumors to Gasly, to Albon in the past has done to completely knock their confidence. And are we going to be saying, goodbye to Checo at the end of the season? Personally, I hope not, but we've seen Red Bull do this time and time again, and unfortunately it could, happen once more in history. Those who do not learn from their mistakes, have failed to, repeat history, and unfortunately Red Bull seem to be doing that every couple of years. But now we are over with that, so we can actually get on to some quick predictions, Phil. So I don't know how quite far to go with this, because we do have a few more sessions coming up, and it is Friday. It's not like the race is tomorrow. But as this qualifying is for the race on Sunday, we'll stick to just the race on Sunday. So give us your podium, please.
Podium, well, the guy who's already on pole is going to win. We already know that. I'm going to say Charles Leclerc keeps it all together, finishes second, and that Lando Norris, which can be considered my wild card, will be third with the McLaren, because it's one of his best racetracks. He's feeling good. I think that will be my podium, and I gave the wild card all in one shot.
Perfect. For me, I think the front two is going to stay the same, of Verstappen and Leclerc. However, I have some weird feeling that Hamilton is going to just find himself onto that podium, be it through strategy, be it through whatever. There's a lot of rumors of rain earlier this week. I don't think they're going to come to fruition, but Hamilton, I can see him on the podium. And then for my bold prediction, I'm going to put Lando on the podium, and Piastri, nestled deep into the points. I think there's definitely potential in that McLaren, and I think Oscar will be wanting to make sure he moves up, because I think P13 is not representative of where he was.
Yeah.
So, well, thank you, guys, for listening to me and Philip's little conversation today. If you did enjoy this podcast, we would love it if you could take 5 to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It is really, really appreciated. It helps us, grow our podcast, and it's great to hear feedback from all of you. So even if you just want to leave any, feedback on, what we're doing here, please make sure you do. And if you're one of the 72 people who aren't yet subscribed to this channel, please consider helping us with a like and a subscribe. It takes 2 seconds. And, it's you always get kept up to date. We, of course, are not just available on Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube. We're also available on Amazon Fire, Google Podcast, Verbal, Pocket Cast. Just search for the Formula One Grid Talk podcast, and you will see our back catalogue of nearly 300 shows now, which is incredible. We're going to hit that goal over this weekend. So, make sure to check that out. Also, please consider supporting the channel on Patreon so we can get better mics, lights, and better recording equipment, and also allow us to do stuff like what we're doing on Sunday with our live show in Manchester more often, so those events can happen. But yeah, we will be back tomorrow with our review of the sprint race. We'll be live on Sunday with our review of the Austrian Grand Prix. So thank you, Phil, for joining me. You are from the Grid podcast, so feel free to plug and let us know where we can find more from you.
Yeah, the GSP, we're on all places you can find podcasts. You can find the Gripster podcast. We have a Gripster podcast YouTube page where my co-host Joshua Fine, former contributor on this show, goes and handles that end of it, the video side and the audio side during the show itself. So one of my good buddies. And so you can watch the live, the feed of our show itself. And then you can find the show on all the different platforms. You can find it also at philipgmathew.com, which is my blog site. The GSP, we talk about all things motorsports. If it goes fast, we talk about it on the Grip Strip podcast. That's the way I always talk about it. So we'll be talking about F1. We have a unique way of presenting F1 these days on our show compared to other shows. We'll be talking about IndyCar, NASCAR, motorsports in America, North America, motorsports around the world. We cover it. We try to do as much as we can in our show and get it all in one big show in one piece there. So if you want to like and subscribe, we always are looking for more followers and more subscribers, more listeners. And yeah, it's always good to be on Grid Talk. It was cool. Louis, we just had a 2-person show that it was nice and smooth and easy and quick. And thanks to Aiden as always for his great work. And thanks to you for a great job hosting. And I'll be a avid watcher on Sunday for sure during the live Grid Talk. I'm probably putting in inappropriate comments in the feed to see if somebody will actually read them. So thanks for all you're doing and for everybody on the crew.
Thank you very much for coming on, Phil. So, guys, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Grid Talk podcast presented by Bet Online. Thank you and goodbye.